All right, we're live. Hi, everybody. Welcome to the Career Chronicles podcast. I'm your host, Sloan Bartley, and this is a very special episode where we are joined by my colleague, Luke Gendron from Spyglass Partners. And we are going to have a conversation today on what it's like to be working parents. This is exciting. This is something Luke and I talk about often as we navigate our work together. I am the mom to an almost 1-year-old. She'll be one next week. Luke has older kids, and so we can commiserate on the, my life stage. He's been through it before, and he's helping me navigate that.
I
So
want
I
to go
wanted to.
back.
That's not what you say when I tell you I was up at 4 a.m. You're like, I don't miss those days. So I
That is
actually
true.
heard you say the opposite. But yeah, so I wanted to have this conversation because it is top of mind for me that organizations have to think about how to accommodate working parents. And so I wanted to bring you on as a different perspective since we're in such different parent life stages. You're a dad, I'm a mom, your kids are older. Mine is, one of the younger stages you can possibly be in. So I'm new at this. You're, a veteran parent. So we can have a conversation about what do our daily lives look like? What kind of accommodations do we need? What kind of breaks do we have to take? And we both work remotely. So this conversation will be centered around how organizations who have work from home employees can support working parents. Before we dive in, though, I do want to take a moment to thank our sponsors and, of course, give an appropriate introduction to Luke. So our sponsors of the podcast, as always, are Spyglass Partners, the wonderful staffing firm for which Luke and I work for. We are focused on helping organizations find talent for both full-time and project-based needs within IT, supply chain, finance and accounting, and executive searches. So if your team needs help finding the right folks, we would love to be your partners in that. I also want to thank Merit Media. One of my previous podcast guests, Shay Paulson, owns this media company, and she has helped support the podcast in many ways. So if you have media or web needs, reach out to Shay. And I want to introduce Luke. So I did say that we work together. We've worked together for about 7 or 8 months now. And Luke was part of the hiring team that brought me on to Spyglass Partners. So I'm excited to have him join us. He is experienced in the staffing industry with almost 20 years of experience, right, Luke? How many years is it?
We'll say that it's
20 is a
more,
nice
but
number.
we'll say that.
Okay. So as long as I've been alive, Luke has been in the
That
staffing
hurts. That
industry.
hurts.
It's not true. I'm not 20. I wish. And you've been in IT, but also other spaces. And so you have an expertise around how to support clients who are hiring. And you also have an expertise in the recruitment space. And this podcast is all about how to better recruit and retain women in tech, but also across all industries. And a lot of what's on women's minds is how to navigate working parenthood is what I'm calling it. And so I think we have a lot to discuss. And so I'm excited to chat about that today with you. I wanted to first kick off, just broadly introduce us to what household or family responsibilities you have as a working dad. And I can share my experience as a working mom too.
Yep, absolutely. And I don't know if it's my connection or your connection, but I think one of us is a little slow.
Probably mine.
Hopefully, it's not me.
Probably mine. No, probably mine. We've got some thunderstorms here, so I'm having some
Yep.
connection impact. But yeah, you go ahead.
That's one of the challenges that we face with working remote, right?
Perfect timing.
So yeah, I think that's a really good starting point. Thank you very much for the introduction. Thanks for having me on today. Glad to be part of this.
Yeah.
When I look at the responsibilities within our household, we try to split it pretty evenly. I mean, if there are dishes to be done, we're both jumping in doing the dishes, right? So we don't have that separation of, we joke about it sometimes, but we don't have that separation of, well, that's the woman's job or that's the man's job. Like we try to share all of the duties around the house equally.
Okay.
Yeah.
Does that happen pretty naturally, or do you guys have to have? Because I feel like for Josh and I, we have fallen into dishes and laundry definitely is 50-50. It's just whoever can get to it, that's who has to get it done. But trash, that is his task. He has to own the trash. He is the trash man. I'm not touching the trash. I'm the person who will smush it down and keep piling stuff on top of it. So does it happen naturally that you guys split everything 50-50, or does it take some work and navigation?
Yeah, I mean, we've always kind of worked it where we want to be equal partners in this.
Yeah.
And we said very early on, before we even had kids, that one of us is going to stay home with the kids. So my
Mhm.
wife had the luxury of her mom stayed home with her and her brother, and she loved the experience of having a parent being home, like coming home from school and being able to do
Yeah.
things. And I had two working parents, and it was a different experience, right? Me and my
Yeah.
brother kept each other busy during the day. We would be doing things after school, getting
Getting
into a
into
little bit of
trouble.
trouble.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Breaking
Absolutely.
stuff.
That's what you're supposed to do. I mean, this was back in the 80s and 90s. That
So it
was
was
before
safe. You
everything
were
was
like, go
monitored.
outside and
So
play.
that's right. That's right. Um, but yeah, I mean, so we decided early on, and I was going I was starting to escalate in my career when we started having kids, and it made
Yeah.
sense for her to, at that time, to be able to stay home with the kids and be with them. And I would have supported it either way, right? I would
Yeah.
have supported her. So it's not like I said, well, I'm going to be the man
It
and
was
you're
her
going to stay home with
choice.
the kids. Yeah, exactly. So it
Hear
very
that,
easily could
Harrison
have gone
Butker?
either
It
way.
was her choice. Listen up.
It was
You don't
our
you don't
choice,
follow
though, and
sports, so I don't know if you have seen the Harrison Butker speech.
it was our choice. We both made the
Yeah, you
choice.
made the choice that that's what you were gonna do for her, and if she had wanted to
Yep,
work, though, you would have had her back on that, which is
100%.
most important thing.
Yeah, and I think some days she regrets it, and she's like, I wish I was able to be outside working where, I could have a break, I could have a day off,
Yeah,
because as a working mom, you
you
don't have
don't get a
days
break.
off. As a
No.
mom,
Yeah.
you don't have days off.
No, I honestly look forward to, like, on Sunday, I'm like you get a little bit of the Sunday scaries, you're like, "Oh, the weekend's over," but as a
Yeah,
parent, you're like, "Ah, tomorrow is the day that somebody else is taking my kid, and I get to just be a working adult, and my job is
yeah,
easy compared to, a screaming infant who is irrational and can't be reasoned with." Like, at
right.
least in my job, I'm like, I know what I'm supposed to be doing. Whereas
There's a lot of
parenting is figuring it out.
similarities between that screaming
And
infant
the
and screaming teenager too, that also can't be rationalized.
Yeah, yeah, it's your kid, and kids at any age don't really wanna rationalize with their parents, so,
No.
um, something I was gonna ask you about is, how things look different now that we're all in this, not all of us, but you and I are in this work from home environment. There's a weird, I guess, lack of separation between home and work because home is work and work is home. And I think
Yeah,
there used to be this clear delineation of you go to work and then you come home but now it's like, okay, in between meetings, do I do the dishes? Do I, for me, it's like, do I prep bottles for the next day? Do I prep food for my 1 year old? You know, even today, I told you this morning that my daughter knocked over a lamp and smashed it to smithereens. And my husband, when he's leaving for work, he was like, if you have time today to vacuum over in that area, that'd be great. And I'm like, but you're going to work. You're not going to have to vacuum because you go to the office and you can't vacuum. I'm in my office. It's just that my office is at home where I could vacuum, but
right.
that's just not on my to-do list today. I have to do my job
Yeah.
just because I'm home. So it's a weird, like, do you experience that? Like where
Oh,
you're pulled in
absolutely.
multiple directions?
Absolutely. And I think everyone that works from home feels that way too. And me and my
Yeah.
wife, we've been best friends before we even got together, and so we've always had a very transparent relationship. And there's been times where, like, I'm checking my phone at, we're out to dinner, and I'm doing work still, and she's
Work
like,
stuff at dinner.
"Hey, look,
Yeah.
it's 7 o'clock, right?"
Like
And
if
so
it's not going to the client's not going to respond to you at 7 o'clock, most
yeah,
likely. So it's
yeah,
like it can wait.
and it's funny because, like, working, I felt like I was working more hours when I was going to the office, because you spend the time in the car, you spend,
You.
both to and from, you're
Yeah.
spending all day away from home and then coming back. It just seems like you're spending so much more time working, but I find myself working more hours working
Yeah.
remote.
Yeah.
Um,
Because you
and
don't have
yeah,
the break. You don't have the
yep,
commute turns your brain off. You're like, well, I'm going home. When I get home, I'm going to eat, watch TV, do whatever it is. Whereas now it's like when the clock strikes 5, I maybe go make dinner, but then I check my emails or I check my phone. And if something comes through, I might go run
yeah,
and do it because my computer's right there. Like we all used to go home without our computers. I guess kind of
yeah,
crazy that we used to go home without
I know.
our laptops and just not do
Yeah.
work in the evening.
Yeah, and I remember putting off getting email on my phone for so long, because I
I
knew as soon as
know.
I started allowing it, it was like the workday doesn't stop. And
Yeah.
it's become worse working from home, but we've we me and my wife have partnered together to really put those lines in the sand. Like when you're at work, we're going to make sure that, like she tries to
You
do
can
all the
be
blocking and
fully,
tackling so I can
yeah.
focus on my work. But like when the work day is
Workday is
done,
done. You
I
have
got to
to
put the phone
be,
down
gotta
and
show
I got
back
to do
up.
stuff.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. And then I check it again, towards the tail end of the evening as well. But, I try to make sure that I'm separating the two, right?
Yeah.
But yeah, it's a weird dynamic because, and I don't think my kids really understand it either, because they see that I'm home, they'll come
Yeah.
home from school and they'll just walk into the office. I'm like, I'm on a
That's
video,
how.
right? I can't talk to you.
Yeah. Well, I think you have an interesting perspective because you're living this, but also you're also a people manager at our organization. So I'd love to get your thoughts on, because part of the podcast is to educate organizations on how to best support people who are dealing with these things, and a lot of them are women. A lot of women are working parents. So that's been the focus of the podcast, as you know. So how do you, as a people manager, take these things into account? Because you have to be able to make these things work for people in order to recruit and retain them at your organization. So how do you keep that in mind?
Yeah, I mean, I think looking at how we're set up, like Mike Parisi, our CEO, he's always given me the flexibility. Like, Luke, if you got appointments, you can go to them. You can do what you want because he knows that I'm going to do my work at the end of the day. He knows
Yeah,
that
it's
a
gonna get done.
responsible person to be able to do the work. And I've tried to empower everyone on our team as well to make sure that, like, Hazelin, I know you've got appointments coming up. You got stuff that you have to do, and I respect that. And I know that you're going to get your work done too.
Yeah.
And again, trying to make sure that I over communicate and make sure that everyone that's working on our team is over communicating. If you've got stuff going on, talk about it. Like that's okay.
Yeah.
Life is going to happen, right? We don't live in that bubble where work is work and you can 100% completely separate it.
Yeah.
Um, this flexibility is on both sides. I know that, like, if I have appointments during the day, I'm gonna have to make up for it this evening, right? Or I'll make up for it at some point during the week to
Yeah.
get the stuff done. And I know you and I have had those conversations as well, and you're really good at making sure that the stuff that you need to cover is covered.
Yeah. And I think this has been a theme on the podcast when I ask people, how do we make organizations work for XYZ population? And the common theme is just to be flexible and understanding. It's just a philosophy. It doesn't have to be these overarching
Yeah.
policies that have to get put into place. Of course, there are some organic practices that come into play, like you and I, talking about communication. There are some communication norms and practices that end up becoming habitual, where we check in on Teams or email, whatever that might be. And you're, just communicating where you're going to be, when you need a break, what appointments you have coming up, how you're covering what needs to be covered, when you're going to be
Right.
away from your desk. Those norms obviously have to be in place. But
Yep.
other than that, it's really just this overarching approach or, philosophy that trusting the people you work with, communicating with the people you work with, and wanting to treat them as humans
Yep.
first, and knowing that life
Yeah.
has to come first.
Yeah, and I think you've seen it firsthand with our communication. I think as a people manager, you have to be able to understand how to read the people under you. And this
Oh
comes in.
yeah.
I think this ties in the question that you had. Like for
Yeah.
my kids, you tend to know your kids the best, right? You know them
Mhm.
probably better than they know them, and you also know that they're little versions of you. So you'll see later in life too that
Oh, I
you already
know.
know what they're going to do because you've done it
Yes.
before. And so
Yeah.
understanding and being able to read your kids it crosses over into the employment world because I need to be able to read everyone that's on my team. I need to be
This
able
is
to
why you're so good
know.
at that. And now I'm connecting the dots, because
Yeah,
you read right through me. I'm like, you'll message me and say, you didn't seem as engaged in that meeting. Like, is everything okay? And I'm like, I thought I was hiding it. Well, but no, my head is somewhere else. I've got,
yeah,
my daughter's sick, or whatever it might be. And you just
right,
pick up on that. It's because you've been reading your kids. So it does make
yeah,
you a better people manager, which was one of my
yeah.
later questions.
And it's funny because there's, when we're looking at, I always forget that we're live when we do these because you're easily able to communicate. It's you do a really good job, and I see you do with your other guests as well. But it makes it seem like we're just on a Teams call right now.
Yeah, we're
Um,
just chatting.
I gotta watch what I say though because we're live.
Yeah.
But but for I don't even know where I was going with that. But for the like when I'm I think I was
When
talking
you're
about, I was
reading
going
your
to talk about,
kids.
yeah, yeah. Thank you. I shouldn't have even said anything. My ADD is kicking in right now. So that's why I wanted to implement the PTO plan, that we have a flexible PTO
Mm,
plan, right? It's not
it's a good
completely
point to bring
unlimited. You
up.
can't take 10 months off during the year, but it's flexible. And,
Yeah.
coming from different environments, and I know it's super controversial to have a PTO plan like that, but
Yes.
I think the people that know me understand that I'm genuine in everything that I do. And so I didn't want to do it because our company wants to take advantage of employees by any means. It's more of because my heart is in the right place. I want to make sure that I'm giving the flexibility to the employees that we have so that you can live your life, right?
Yeah.
I when I was at a former employer, it was you use your time or you lose it. And
Accrual
so
system kind of thing.
yeah, and so
Use it or lose it.
people would come to me and say, I have this family vacation coming up in August, but my dad's in the hospital. I'm like, just take the time.
Yeah.
You shouldn't have to
Just take it
decide
and don't
between,
submit it. Yeah.
yeah, exactly. Be an adult. Like I'm hiring professionals to be
Yeah.
adults and to be grown-ups. So do that, right? I'm
The
going to
accrual
respect the
process
time that
is
you need.
problematic too, because like I know I used to work somewhere where the time you accrued was also had a money value tied to it. So people would try to accumulate as much as they could so that
Yeah,
if they did leave, they'd get a big payout. It'd be like, I don't want to use my time because I want to get paid out for it.
right.
Which I guess is fine that you're getting the value for it either way. But from a
Yep.
mental health standpoint, it's like you do have to have time off. Like you just more than just the holidays.
Yeah,
Like you have to have time off. And
right.
that's what I like about a flexible PTO policy is that I don't really take big vacations like where I'm out for a week or 2 weeks. I have done that in the past, but it's more often than not, you just need a day here or there to
Yeah,
recoup, spend time with family, a long weekend, whatever that is. And I think a
right.
flexible PTO policy allows people to do that
Yeah.
more
And
easily.
and being and being able to read the employees on the team too. Like I know we've had conversations where I'm like,
Mhm.
Sloan, like take the day off. You got a lot
Take the
going on. It's
morning.
okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, take the morning, do what you need to do.
Or
Right. And
you've
if you
said like
don't
take the
have that,
afternoon to prepare. I know you're going to be out traveling
yeah,
tomorrow. Take the rest of the afternoon to go do what you need to do to prepare for a trip, which is huge because
right,
everybody always underestimates how much packing and errands you have to run right before a big trip,
right.
especially when you have kids.
Yeah,
Um, so that's
absolutely. And
important.
and and if you have the accrual based PTO, like you can't really force someone to take time off because you're
Yeah.
forcing them to take their time off.
Yes, and that's how
But
my
it
husband is. He can't ever. He's like, I'll have to take a later flight than you because I can't use my hours. And I'm like, oh my
right,
gosh, like this is ridiculous. Like
right.
it's just changing
Yep.
your whole plans to accommodate this accrual system.
Yeah. And again, just back to being able to like draw the connection between the two. It's reading your employees and making sure that you understand where people are coming from, right? Having that flexibility with your employees if you trust them. If you don't, that's a different conversation.
We'll have to talk about that on another day on how to
Yeah.
hire teams that you trust and
Yep.
what to do if you haven't. Something we dabbled on is the ways in which being a parent makes you more observant. How does that, we've talked about how that makes you a better people manager, but how do you think that makes you a better partner to the clients that you support? Because I think there's this idea that being a working parent means you can't give 100% to either your job or your kids. You're either, maybe you're giving 80% to one and 20% to the other, but you have only so much to give and you're never going to be able to do it
Yeah.
all. But I like to challenge that idea because I think that there are ways in which being a parent actually makes us better at our jobs. So are there ways in which you've seen it help you better serve clients in this role?
Yeah. I think by, the conversation that me and my wife had about setting those boundaries with work and making sure that it's not all encompassing has definitely helped. Right. Setting those clear lines of like, hey, after 5, like if there's an emergency, reach out to me. But after 5, it's my family's time. And same thing on the other side of it. If it's between these hours, unless it's an emergency, like I need to focus on my work. I need to be able to
Yeah.
focus on this. So setting those boundaries allows me to be able to make sure that I'm giving 100% to both sides when
Yeah.
I'm spending that time together.
Yeah.
So when I'm
I,
fully invested in my kids and we're doing something, I'm not sitting there on my phone. I'm actually fully invested into my kids and into my wife.
yeah. And it sounds like you're learning how to communicate the boundary. It's not just setting the
Yeah.
boundaries, but it's also knowing how to message it and communicate it and be overly communicative in everything that you do, both at home and at work. And I think that's what clients appreciate, is a partner who is going to overly communicate what they can expect, what they'll get out of you, and what
Yeah.
they're going to get when they work with you. And I think being a parent requires a lot of communication between, if you're a co-parent, if you're parenting with a spouse or a partner, you have to learn how to communicate about everything, every little thing. We're out of milk, or we're out of this, and it just makes us, I think, better communicators. And I've seen that on the client side, that it allows me to stay on top of communication when it comes to the services we provide.
Yeah, and the customers that I work with, they're genuine people as well. I know I've
Yeah.
had one customer where, he's caught me out at dinner and I'm talking to him. He's like, "Are you out at dinner right now?" I'm like, "Yeah, I am." He's like, "Hang up the phone, spend time with your family. We can talk in the morning."
Yeah.
And so they really truly, I think it's a good back and forth. Just like the team that we have, we try to partner with good people. I know you
Yeah.
do, I do, everyone on
Yeah.
on our team does. We try to make sure that we're partnered with really genuine people. And it comes across in the services that we offer.
Yeah.
I think any of the customers that we work with, they really understand that we have everyone's best interests at heart. We're not trying to just be a for-profit, take all the money. Like we're genuinely trying to help them build their teams. We're trying to help the candidates find new homes,
Yeah.
and help build our company by doing it the right way.
Yeah. And we're trying to build relationships with people and
Yeah.
understand who they are and who might be a good fit for working with them. Because that's the benefit of working with a staffing firm, especially a smaller one like us, is we can truly get to know the client. And so we can really be a partner for vetting people for team fit when we're talking to
Yeah.
them. We're going to treat the candidates as humans and with an empathetic approach. We're going to treat our clients that way. And it just makes us better able to match people together. So it
Yeah.
makes for a better team culture internally too, which we've already talked about. So yeah, just I think being parents is what makes us more gracious and more human focused. We
Mhm.
know that people have stuff going on, and we've had to build patience dealing with little ones. You have to build patience dealing with teenagers.
Oh
I know
yeah.
that from being a teenager. You're dealing with it with your own teens.
Yep.
So yeah, I think parenthood can make us all better in a lot of ways. But we have talked about how parenting takes up a lot of time. You got to outsource tasks. Are there things that you have to outsource? Either, knowing how to delegate at work is a skill in of itself. Knowing how to delegate at home is a skill in of itself. How do you outsource tasks to free up your time so that you are able to give 100% to both things?
Yeah, and I don't know if it's a guy thing or if it's just a me thing, but like that, this is where like having a really good partnership with my wife has helped, because she sees that like I try to do everything, right? So
Yeah.
I'll be out there for 2 hours mowing the lawn, and meanwhile like my kids are begging for my attention. And so she's really helped me to say, like, we can get someone to help mow the lawn. Like, you don't,
Right.
and they can do it in 10 minutes, have a crew of
Yeah.
people that can do it, and it's going to look a lot better than when I do it.
Yeah.
And it allows me to have that and invest that time back in my family, which is
Yep.
huge. So, mowing the lawn is one of those things. That taking care of the yard, that's one of the things that we outsource. Closing our pool last year was something that we outsourced. It was just getting to be a headache, and trying to work
Can't
was
believe you
really
try to do that
busy.
yourself.
Yeah, and
Are there like chemicals involved? Like you have to be like a pool chemist? Like you were
yeah,
handling
you
all of
do.
this?
You do, and those are some of the things, like obviously costs come into it, and that's
Yeah.
where whatever I can do, I do. But if it's something that's not going to cost a lot to outsource it to someone else to do it, and allow me to have more family time, those are some of the things that we look for.
Yeah.
So really
Yeah.
just, taking care of the pool sometimes, whenever I can't get to it, taking care of the lawn. Um, Painting is one of those things too. Like when we first moved in here, I painted every single wall in the house. I am not a ladder person. We have some vaulted ceilings, that we live in a contemporary. And so like most of the house is fine, but like there are parts where it's really steep, and I am not a ladder person. And
No.
so like when we had to do it again, we're like, yeah, we're calling someone to do this.
Yeah. Yeah. There are people who are specialists and they are
Yeah.
trained in certain skill sets, and it can save you time and it can save you pain and energy, which
Yes.
all tends to equate to money. I read this book and I'm not going to remember the name of it, but it was, about financial planning. And you have to calculate what your time is worth from a money standpoint.
Yeah.
And there are tasks that if I do them, if it takes up an hour of my time, if that's an hour I could put back into business development at work that could equate to finding new clients or bringing on new deals, I could stand to make more money doing that than I could saving money doing the task myself rather than paying someone to do it. And so that's a constant thing you have to think about. And now as a parent, there's even more things that I have to consider whether I should outsource them or not.
Yeah. And I think that it boils over into work. I like the segue that you just made there. It's something that, I historically have never used agencies to help find people for our internal teams.
Right.
But it's something that, again, our CEO, Mike, had helped me to see, like, you could sit there and spend like half your week looking for another salesperson, or you can outsource that.
You can still
find
do your real job, like what you're supposed to be doing. Yeah.
Exactly. And the customers that use us, they do the same thing too. Like, they could spend all of their time looking for candidates to join their team, or they could rely on a service like us where we can, this is what we do all day. We're always building and communicating with professionals in IT, in supply chain, accounting and finance, and executive, where we can help make those introductions a lot faster than they could do on their own.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Well, I think that's a great note to end on. I do typically ask all my podcast guests the final question, and I'll have to change it for you because typically I ask, when or where do you feel most empowered as a woman? I don't even want to hear you attempt to answer that because so I think I've changed it in the past for other guests of, when or where have you felt most empowered, or if you prefer to answer it of, from the people manager standpoint of when have you, empowered others, you're welcome to answer it from that point of view as well.
Yeah, I would say, I think I'm always trying to empower everybody that's on my team, not just women, but everyone alike. Sure. But when I hear, and again, this goes back to being able to read the employees. Like, when you and I were first starting to work together, you seemed to have a voice that you wanted to get out there on this specific topic. And so I wanted to empower you to get out there and do that. And I tried to encourage that. Same thing with Joseph Jewell and his podcast too. Like, I could see that he had the want, and he had the means to do a podcast. So I want to empower that. I think I just posted about this I commented on someone's post yesterday or 2 days ago. And I think the story that always comes back to me, and I think I actually introduced her at one point to you for your podcast series, but where I've been, I think professionally, where I've empowered a woman was, there was someone that came to me, and she was on the, she was a stay-at-home mom, but she wanted to get back into the workforce, and she wanted to know how to do that, but she was so beat down by, and she was so beat down by the traditional interview process, and people weren't taking her seriously because she's like, well, I haven't worked in 7 years in the workforce. Right. But I saw a spark, and I saw that she was driven, and I really pushed for her to get into a couple of different places, and she just absolutely nailed it.
Yeah.
So that's one thing. Like, I think companies need to stop looking at that as a weakness. And I'm kind of saying it verbatim, but it's not a weakness; it's a strength when a woman takes time to take care of their family.
Oh, I could talk another 15, 30 minutes because I'm so glad you said that, because that is, I think I've said it almost every podcast episode, like, we need to stop viewing career gaps as a red flag. I know I've worked with so many folks that see it as a red flag when they see it on a resume, or they want an explanation. And there's just so many valid reasons why someone might take a career break, and doing one to raise a family is just one of them. I know many folks have been impacted by layoffs. And that's caused folks to take career breaks that maybe wasn't necessarily their choice, and they're doing the best they can to find another job. And it just shouldn't be viewed negatively. Have a conversation with that person. It sounds like that's what you did, is that you met with her, had a conversation, and looked for the context. That's your favorite word, is just to look at the context of what's this person's story? What do they bring to the table? Do I think they could do the job? And if the answer is yes, take a chance on them and see if there's a fit. And if there's not, then you can navigate that conversation again like a human being and explore that with that person and say, this isn't working out for XYZ reasons. But I completely agree. I wish people would would stop viewing that as a negative or as a detriment when it can actually be viewed as a strength. Because we both know that staying home and working to manage a household and a family is more than a 40-hour-a-week job. And so this person probably is able to handle a lot of responsibilities, is probably highly efficient, and works well under pressure. And can
it's harder than this job.
It is harder than this job. I look forward to coming to work and letting other people take care of my child. And it's not that I don't enjoy spending as much time with my daughter as I can. It's just, it's taxing, and it gets to be a lot. And it's exhausting. So yeah, if folks can handle that for many years on end, they can handle this job for sure.
Absolutely. Well, thanks, Sloan, for having me on. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, thanks for coming on. Thanks everybody for tuning in. Drop your questions and thoughts below in the chat. Luke and I would love to hear from you about what it's like to be working parents. We'd love to continue this conversation. We will see you guys next time on the Career Chronicles. Thanks for joining us.